Today's episode of the Electric Vibe podcast is brought to you by Uncle Ricky's Food, home of Uncle Ricky's bold and smoky barbecue sauce. For a barbecue sauce with the perfect balance of boldness and sweet, smoky flavor, try Uncle Ricky's bold and smoky barbecue sauce. Uncle Ricky's, he ain't gonna play with you. Today's episode isn't our usual interview. Today we're doing something different. We're doing a tribute. On August 2nd, the music world lost David Rivkin, a.k.a. David Z, at age 78.
If you don't know the name, you know the work. Purple Rain, Kiss, Funky Town, She Drives Me Crazy. David Z was behind the board or in front of it with a snare drum and a wooden ruler for a huge piece of the sound that this show is built around. Ooh.
Welcome to the Electric Vibe podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, J. David Silva.
And I'm Kurt Hoffman. Normally we've got a guest joining us, but as Jay earlier said in our intro, today we're telling David Z's story ourselves as a way of honoring what he built and what a fortress did this man build in the music world.
Indeed, Kurt, indeed. But, before we get into the catalog, we want everybody to hear how the people closest to David talked about him in the days after he passed.
Mm-hmm.
David's brother, Bobby Z, who was the drummer for Prince and the Revolution, told the Minneapolis Star-Tribune that David was a master of gizmos in the studio, and I don't think anything could be more true. Owen Husney, Prince's first manager and a lifelong friend of David's, also told the Star-Tribune, David was the secret ingredient on many, many musical projects, and I think we can all attest to that.
Mm-hmm.
And Andre Simone, the bassist who lived with David and Prince while recording Prince's For You album in 1978, wrote on Instagram, he was always cool, tough as nails, but he was cool.
Yeah. Three very different relationships there. You got a brother, manager, and bandmate. And all three land on the same idea. He was quietly essential, not chasing credit, just chasing the sound.
And, Kurt, I think that, when we talk about Minneapolis Sound or we talk about music in general, there's so much attention that's paid to the artist, obviously, and deservedly so and rightfully so. But, there's always a world that goes on behind the microphone and behind the performance. And we're talking about we're talking about the editors, the mixers, the engineers. And David Z was all of that. And, we would be remiss to just say that he worked with Prince or he worked with the Minneapolis Sound. I mean, the plethora of musicians that he worked with.
I mean, so going further back, and I like you, we always listen to different interviews and things in preparation for the podcast, and there's some great resources out there. The one thing that struck me is that he went out he was active in the 60s, late 60s, long before 10 years before For You, Prince's first album came out in 78. And before the demos and all that stuff, he went out to California to be a songwriter first and foremost. He didn't start out and folk music. So, I mean, this guy's got a breadth and depth of knowledge, not just in the music genres, but the craft of songwriting himself. So, he had a couple of songs. They didn't really go anywhere in particular. And he was hired by A&M Records. 5 different occasions he recalled in one interview. And he was hired as a songwriter for that one. Then he was hired as a producer. Then he was hired as an engineer. Then he was hired as, So he's had all these different, battleground training. So by the time he comes back to some teenage wonderkind like Prince, he was already ready to, show what he had. And he learned by trial and error. He was a completely self-taught producer. He didn't go to any music school or anything like that to learn to produce. He did a lot of trial and error. And my goodness, what he would do down the road.
I mean, and for working with a young, 20-year-old Prince at the time, introduced by, Owen Husney at Sound 80 Studios in 1966, I believe it was. And, to start with this raw talent and to be a part of that at the inception, and then to go on and help create. Because let's face it, frankly, the engineer and the producers and engineers, they do help create the sound and the songs to go on to help, an artist like Prince and so many others create their distinctive
Yeah.
sounds, really has to be given its due. And again, we had already alluded to the fact of the number of musicians that David Z had worked with. And starting with Prince, I get it, but he put his stamp on so many other projects. But it's a great starting point, really, if you think
How
about it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Jay, how about Funky Town, for instance?
Right.
So, for many people may not know this about David Z's contributions to that song. He basically engineered and produced the whole damn song himself, along with one other person in the technical part of it. He layered that sound. He's playing rhythm guitar. That's his guitar playing on the song. The vocoder stuff was an accident. They didn't know what the hell all this stuff was. So, he never knew it was going to be a big hit that it was, but it was it's considered the last true disco song, and he contributed to that. It's kind of a capstone on the end of an era, of a movement, the disco. I always remember Funky Town for the movie Airplane.
Yes.
Because it does feature in that movie. So when I was a kid, I always associate that song with with a funny movie like Airplane was. What a classic.
Here we are,
And
David Z, who was so instrumental, no pun intended,
yeah,
to that song. But you know what, Kurt, before we get too ahead of ourselves,
yeah.
obviously David Rivkin came to be known professionally as David Z, but can you share the story of how the
Oh,
Z came in with the brothers Bobby and David?
and if any of the relatives are watching, like Robbie Pastor, their first cousin, and our thoughts go out to him and folks that we've had a chance to, we briefly interacted with Bobby Z when we were out at Prince Celebration. We've seen him.
Vicky, his Bobby's wife, is just lovely. We
Yes,
met the
yes,
person,
yes.
on social media. She's always very gracious.
Very positive, very, very sunny personality to boot, but I'm all three brothers. You think about Bobby, being the drummer in the Revolution, their middle brother, Steven, who went on to be this award-winning, was in bands with them when they were kids, but went on to be an award-winning film editor for things like My Cousin Vinny, all three Pirates of the Caribbean movies, the good ones. All the Avatar movies. He's the editor for all those movies. These guys are creative beings, creative geniuses in their own right. And you got the eldest brother. So the story goes behind the Z name was that a childhood nickname for Bobby Z was Bubsy. Bubsy. There's that Yiddish Jewish cultural fabric that works into that. Like Bubby. When you call somebody, hey Bubby, Shaynola. I have many Jewish friends I grew up with when I was a kid, and I would hear these expressions and stuff like that, and they had a different character and flavor. So he took the Bubsy idea and Bobby Z. He put the Z in there as a kind of a reference. And you and I were talking earlier about Rush and their enormously talented bass player, singer, and keyboardist, Geddy Lee. The reason why he's called Geddy, Geddy, is his mom couldn't pronounce the R's, being this Jewish, I believe Russian Jewish, Lithuanian, I believe maybe, immigrant, Holocaust era, I might add. And, so he adopted the name Geddy as opposed to Gary, his real name. So I found a kind of a tangential connection to that whole thing. But anyhow, that's where that whole Z things. But Steven did not adopt that in Hollywood. He did not adopt that. It was David and Bobby.
But Kurt, no matter what the iteration of the name is, with David working on the demos for you and being around during that early period of Prince,
Yeah.
The work that he did, who knows if he doesn't put his stamp on that, does Prince's career take a different tack? Does he even get a recording contract? So, I certainly don't want to belittle or discount the influence that the engineer or the producer has on a project, because sometimes that can make or break, quite frankly, a career.
Yeah. No kidding. The juggernaut, Purple Rain. A lot of people may not recall this, remember this. That's a live track. Okay. He did some overdubs. The strings were overdubbed at the very end of the song in post-production, what have you. It's a 14-minute track that David was able to whittle that down. There's a third verse that's not used. Well, it's actually a second verse that's not used. I don't want your money or something like that. And it just didn't fit the character. Prince had him edit that out. So to take that track, 14 minutes, and edit it down to about 9 minutes, and not lose the flavor or the excitement. Here it is a live recording, the spontaneity of it. I mean, it was just him in a mobile truck and a little bit of luck. And a guy by that point, he knew what he was doing, but he had also paid his dues working with numerous other bands before getting there. But to your point, working on Prince's demos, Prince, but backing up a little bit, Prince didn't initially trust him. He's like, who is this guy? Let's go. Let's get out of here. That was the initial reaction, according to Owen Husney, if you watch different interviews regarding that. But then he kind of reversed himself. He saw what David was doing in the studio. He says, okay, I trust this guy. This is the only guy I want to work with. So the point is, it's wild to think about one skeptical teenager and one studio session, and David Rivkin is already the guy he wants to work with. And the only guy he wants to work with. So I just find it so amazing that
it's a foreshadowing of things to come.
Yeah.
Incredible hits. Let me take it back to that night that they recorded Purple Rain, because they also recorded I Would Die for You and Baby I'm
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
5 tracks that ended up being on the Purple Rain album and in that mobile truck. And look at it's not an overused word, but look at the magic that they create.
Completely. This is when they were using tape to do this. So you really had to be careful. And David knew his way around a razor blade. In fact, if I remember correctly, Prince watched what he was doing in the studio. He saw how he was cutting, because Prince cut his own tape, rarely. Early days. Now, when he had engineers and stuff like that, he didn't mess with it, but he could see the craft of what David was doing. And it's not an overstatement to say he brought his own spin on those records, but really influenced so many artists and a wide variety of artists.
Right. And that's really where I wanted to go next, because the stamp that he helped Prince put on popular music is evident. But we can't, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk. And we're going to come back to some of the Prince story.
The big stuff, yeah.
No, but I mean, you can't deny the work that he did for so many other artists.
Yeah.
And there are the obvious ones. Talk about Fine Young Cannibals.
Oh my God, she drives me crazy. There's that whole sound that he gets with like a yardstick or a ruler, hitting the snare drum and having these the gate. There's a noise. It can eliminate noise. I have a gate pedal for my guitar stuff at home when I play, and I haven't played in a little bit, but when you use gate a certain way, it'll open up a certain threshold of sound. But he had it tracked to a drum machine, a hi-hat cymbal, and an acoustic guitar, and it created this nearly impossible rhythm pattern to play, and the shimmery sound effect of the drums synced with this acoustic guitar, that he was always experimenting with sounds in the studio.
You're talking about Kiss now.
I'm talking about Kiss. But he took that idea and took the gated drum sounds and all that stuff. When it came to the snare sound on She Drives Me Crazy, that sound, that was created with a boombox attached to a mic and a gate, again, synced up, so that it would create this unique drum sound. And everybody wanted to know, how the hell did you get that sound? And the fact that Fine Young Cannibals never really did anything after that.
Right. And certainly nothing to
that degree. Yeah.
It's those types of things that I'm always fascinated by, because, you and I have read some of the tributes that have come in from people that have worked with David. Elisa Fiorillo had some wonderful kind words to say about David, for instance, when he worked on her I Am album.
That's right. Yeah.
It's those types of things that an engineer or producer can come up with that really just help catapult the success of a song, or quite frankly of an album. Again, can't be understated. You and I had been talking to a good friend of ours who worked at Paisley Park, and the quote that the gentleman gave was, Prince sometimes resented having to have an engineer, having to
Yeah.
use an engineer, but he knew that he needed them. And I get it. Prince did so much himself and could do so much himself, but quite frankly, he needed an engineer. Well, sometimes that's a really good thing. Most of the time it's
Yeah.
probably because look at what David Z was able to do, not
Yeah.
just for Prince, but for so many artists, putting his sound on. And I say that a lot of times that sound was never the same. Now, granted, working with a different, a wide variety of different artists in different genres. So I
Yeah.
would expect him to repeat himself, but he kept things fresh. I mean, look at again, some of the other artists
Mm.
that he worked with. And again, there's way too many to mention while we're here, but I was
Oh my God.
into Dion Estes' album Spell. And Dion Estes, of course, was
Was he on that as well?
yes, he actually recorded
Son of,
you helped record two tracks on that album. And the Spell album for me, quite frankly, is underrated. And yes, Dion will always be known as the longtime bass player for Wham, and then with George Michael on
yeah.
a lot of George's work and studio work, but his solo album is a gem, and David was a part of that. And it's got this pop sound to it, right,
Yeah.
with a little bit of funk in it. And I think that one of the tracks that David worked on was "You're the Only One," and it's fresh, it's different. It doesn't sound anything like Big Head, Todd and the
Todd and
Monsters.
the Monsters.
Doesn't sound anything like that. Doesn't sound anything like Fine Young Cannibals.
No,
So I mean,
that's the thing. And then later in his career, sorry to steamroll over you, but getting into his later career where he decided, I'm going to work with blues artists. I'm not finding what I'm looking for. I want to go back to my roots. And he loves his blues, so he goes and works with Etta James. He works with Buddy Guy. He basically helps Johnny Lang and it discovered him basically. Kenny Wayne Shepherd.
right?
I mean, the Sons of the Allman Brothers. I mean, he's worked with so many different genres of music, but it all works out. I love his story about working with Etta James. Him call him getting a call from her saying, "I don't want to work no more for a producer." They're going to make me sound like Prince, and he was already getting guff from her. Of course, he's used to working with a difficult personality. But the secret about David is that, and he said this in numerous interviews, is that he didn't work for Prince. He worked beside Prince. He wasn't on his payroll. He wasn't employed by Prince, but he consulted Prince.
And
He,
and
you know,
his work stands for himself. He won a Grammy working with Etta James, for
oh,
goodness sake.
he won. I believe he won 2 for the album he worked with.
Right, right.
Yeah. No, but but it's significant. A veteran artist like Etta James. What does she need a producer like Dave? Well, guess what? The proof's in the pudding, baby. The proof is in the pudding.
We also can't forget Billy Idol, Elvis Costello.
Yeah,
I mean,
what did he do for Billy Idol? See, I don't remember what he.
I'd have to go look it up. But
Me
but
too.
the point being, though, just
Yeah,
with artists of just such a different style and a
yeah,
different genre, and still be able to put that stamp on it, and to be entrusted with his craft with those different artists,
yeah,
again, can't be overstated. One of the other things that Kurt that I've always
yeah.
noticed, we had never had the chance to meet David. We
No,
interview him,
would love to have interviewed him.
but in seeing him in so many other interviews,
Yeah,
he looks cool. He's got the bandana on, he's got the glasses, but
yeah,
when he's telling stories, and I wanted to say one of the interviews I was looking at was from Sunset Sound, is Sunset Sound.
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Those are great interviews.
He's just this kind of low key, understated individual as he's telling the stories. Like it's like
Yeah,
if you and I were sitting down telling stories, there's not a hint of braggadocio, not a hint of showing off. It's just
no.
he's telling the stories of the music that he helped make.
I mean, but he's proud at the same time of the contributions he made. I mean, he's really proud of Kiss, the arrangements and the gated drum sound, and it's that unique sound. And when we had Martin Ware on, remember, and he quoted this himself. David quoted himself. Martin remembers somebody said it sounded like the demo. It sounded like a demo tape, a great demo. It's one of the greatest sounding demo tapes of all time. I was struck when I heard Kiss for the first. I remember this clearly. Going back to my days as 16-year-old driving my used Chevy Caprice, white with powder blue cloth interior with the roof that would cave in and look like a tent inside my car. And I'm driving to work as a dishwasher after school. I had a part-time job washing dishes at a mom and pop restaurant. And I remember the first time that that song came on. And I'm like, what in the hell is that sparse drum sound and the pauses and stops and starts on a song? It was very stripped down, very you listen to the rest of the Parade album, I'm like, nothing else sounds like Kiss.
Right. And think about, and I can do the same thing. I can remember I actually recorded Kiss off the radio from a local radio
Oh,
station
cool.
and it debuted. But think about that. The sound was so different. Okay. We
Yeah.
remember where we were when we first heard it.
I remember it clearly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so again, it didn't sound like anything back then. It doesn't sound like anything now. But it had such a unique sound that we're able to remember where we were when we first heard it. Now it lives on in the quite frankly of some of the greatest songs of all time, and that again is attributed to David Z. What we were talking a little bit about the reactions and the tributes that were coming in.
Yeah.
And actually help support everything that we were just talking about. One of them that struck me though was what Bobby Z said, David's brother said, he was a fearless studio experimenter and a true rebel who linked instruments and used the mixing board in unconventional ways. And we just got through talking about that. But to your, without having, so-called formal training, right? And just building it on your own experience. I mean, think about what he was able to do in popular music just by trying different things.
Yeah. He unconventional things. That it's studio tricks that you can't learn any other way but through trial and error. In an era where you didn't have Pro Tools, you didn't have all these digital conveniences of editing that you have now. You can do a gazillion takes now. This was back in the days of magnetic recording tape that kids today will never even know about. And he was an innovator. He was a pioneer. He was a sound pioneer. Really. I mean, at the end of the day, he knew how to get a mic placement for the instruments and stuff like that, but he was not afraid to try new things and see. And if it didn't work, it didn't work. You try something else.
No, but again, a true testament of someone who's been in the game for so long, right?
Yeah.
Continuing to challenge yourself, continuing to be an innovator. And quite frankly, I think that's what David did. The other thing that I noticed was, quite frankly, Kurt, and it was to be expected, was the tributes that were just coming in from people outside of the industry, outside the studio, who had an appreciation and a recognition for what David had done. And a lot of the fan groups on some social media sites, regular people like you and I, who had such a knowledge of David's work and appreciation of David's work. And people are talking about songs from groups, quite frankly, that I had never even heard of. With. So that goes a long way to showing the type of stamp that his career and his technique and artistry had on, quite frankly, millions of people.
I'm going to make a comparison, and I hope somebody out there, maybe anybody wants to comment on this episode, your favorite David Z moments, favorite artists that maybe we might have missed. But I always I kind of compare him to Arif Mardin, who was a producer that worked with Daryl Hall and John Oates on their early recordings, like She's Gone. That whole idea of moving the keys up till he gets to She's Gone. That was his whole idea, to move the keys up and up and up. But he produced, like David, he produced for such a wide variety of artists. He could go from Hall and Oates to John Prine. And if you don't know who John Prine is, looking up, hell of a singer-songwriter, passed away a few years ago during COVID. And then would work on Aretha Franklin's 80s comeback. Along with guys like Narada Michael Walden and stuff like that. But Arif, I believe he did the version of I Feel For You that Chaka Khan did, and that kind of reinvigorated her career. Ironically, it's a Prince song. But that guy could produce for such a wide variety of artists as well. And it didn't matter the genre. He just knew what worked for that artist.
Right.
And that's David Z.
And he would have to, because, I mean, if you think about it, other artists that he worked with, Mike Zito, Johnny Lang. We talked about Johnny Lang. So again, you're talking about, you've got, okay, funk, rock, blues,
Yep.
pop, folk, so I mean, you've got to be worth your salt if you're going to put your stamp on so many different varieties of music and still be able to pull it off effectively.
Yeah. Even did stuff with George Clinton. I've just remembered him. I've just heard him in an interview. But again, he, he had his touch on all these, not just legacy artists, but brand new artists as well.
Right.
And he worked with Prince before Prince became a legacy artist, and helped over the decades help, not didn't work with him all the time, but anytime he, actually before he passed, I think there were some problems in Studio A that he came down and helped. It needed to be cleaned up. The knobs were kind of dirty. They just needed an overhaul. And that's the last time he saw Prince was, hadn't seen him in a long time, stuff like that. So, up till the very end, he was always there at a moment's away with a phone call, you know?
And, I know that David quietly retired in 2025.
Right. Hmm.
Retirement was kind of like, from what we noticed from afar, was just very understated, very quiet.
Yep.
As see
So
again, to
it's
your
the way he
point,
came in. He went out the way he came in.
watching the interviews with him, as I mentioned, and just seeing him as, basically just a very matter of fact, very humble
Yeah.
gentleman who was part of some of these giant records
Yeah.
and giant acts. And he certainly didn't, at least from the interviews that I've seen and some of the
Yeah.
things I've didn't wear it outwardly. He just
Yeah.
seemed like a humble but proud man.
Absolutely. Well, as we come to a close here, it's important to note that we're losing. I don't have to tell. Most people know that at the time of this recording, we're losing people in all facets of music. So we need to take this time with these people as we're able to meet some of these artists in real time. Like you and I are going to be going to Paisley Midwest, and we're going to be meeting with folks like Eric Leeds, saxophone player, and Matt Bliston, aka Atlanta Bliss, and the trumpet. Um, and we get to tell these people and have the honor and privilege to tell these people how much their contributions. Well, we've done it virtually, but we get to do it in person and let these people know how much we love them and the music that they and the memories that they gave to us and how they made us feel with their contributions to some of the most important artists that that ever walked the planet. So I really appreciate that we got this time to do a standalone episode. It's just the two of us to discuss such a legendary figure like David C. Rifkin. Um, what else can we say, Jay?
And I think that, as we close, we'll keep things a little bit different as we close this time. And we'll just say, David Z, thank you for the music. Thank you for the memories. Rest in honor.